Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first of a three series of 3 key factors to onboard and retain your remote workforce. My name is Dan Diefendorf. I'm the president of LiveTiles, and I'm joined by Lisa Bouchard, who is also the president of Datadome. And we'll be going through a number of things we think that many of us are feeling today, both as workers and managers and leaders in these difficult times, but also seeing great opportunities on way to engage people as we're all working more remotely than we ever have been. Before we jump right in, I'm going to say just a few words about LiveTiles, and then I'll hand it over to Lisa to talk about Datadome and her work. So if any of you are familiar with LiveTiles, we are a global software company. And the best way to summarize us is our key mission is to help people love their work. And oftentimes technology doesn't serve ourselves or our employees. It actually makes work more difficult in many ways. And so our mission is really to help people love their work and to create engaging tools and software to help do that. But one of the main focuses of what we do and why we do what we do is to create more human connection. So we do that a variety of different ways. And what we think we've been proving and have proven over 1,300 customers and about 6 years of working on this is that we look at how people communicate, how people work, how people interact with each other, and then we look at that across different regions. We look at that across different languages, and certainly different dynamics and social interdynamics that help people do their best work. So I'm going to leave it there right now. Lisa, I'll hand over to you to introduce Datadome, and we'll get right into the topic.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Dan. So it's a nice blend because Dan's organization is the technology, but there's a connection to people, and our organization is definitely focused on the people. We have about 25 years experience, and we work in 3 main realms. We really want to make sure people are bringing on the best people and the best hires, and that once they're on, that they're building really strong and effective teams. And then we also work with leaders to develop them to their full potential. And we use a lot of assessments in order to accomplish that. We really feel when people raise their self-awareness about how they can leverage their strengths and how they can work on some development opportunities, we really see that mesh with the mission that we have. And also using those tools to understand other people better and to build stronger partnerships. There's a lot of things that people need to get done in organizations these days, and we're really trying to build partnerships in order to do that. So we do a lot of different programs. A couple of them are executive coaching and team effectiveness. Again, we do a lot in leadership development. We work with some sales teams around behavioral selling skills. And one of the things I also think that's very needed in organizations is working on difficult conversations. I think once people raise their self-awareness, know a little bit more about themselves and other people, are really figuring out how to have difficult conversations in a productive way is something else that we work on as well. So one of the things we wanted to talk about is about employee retention and why that's such an important metric that we have. One of the things I think that's interesting is, you know, a lot of times when we're looking at retention, it's getting people in and having a great culture and training and developing and keeping them there. You know, in some companies we hear there's kind of a revolving door, and it's interesting. I think everybody's looking at Glassdoor, especially the younger workforce these days, to actually kind of see about the culture of the company and how they bring people in and what they do to retain them and what the culture is like. You know, and sometimes people will actually not want to apply for a job because of that, and some people can't wait to get into a company because of that. I have a funny story. A friend of mine's daughter was looking for a job and had looked on Glassdoor, and I heard that she was looking for it, and it just so happened a friend of mine is friends with the CEO at that company, and I said, hey, I can give my friend a call and maybe, you know, if she can talk to the CEO. And she's like, oh my God, that would be great. And then she talked to her daughter, and her daughter said, oh, please don't have him do that. And I said, I'm so intrigued, like, why not? And she said, well, if you look on Glassdoor, he does not have very high ratings. And I would be afraid that if I got the job there and with the great people that I work with, they might not like me because of the CEO. So just so important, the type of culture that we have, and that we want to be a preferred employer, that people want to come. You know, sometimes you see want ads because there's a revolving door, and sometimes you see a lot of want ads because companies are growing and expanding, because they're really making sure their employees are engaged and trained, and there's customer loyalty that we're seeing there. So again, employee retention is a pretty important metric. We're going to have some statistics as we go through these. And the first one is from Bonusly, and it says the cost to replace a highly trained employee can exceed 200% of their annual salary. And again, just why it's so important once we get the right people in to make sure that we're training them effectively. And the second quote is highly engaged employees are 75% less likely to be looking for a job compared to actively disengaged employees. So just so important that people are engaged. You know, sometimes we bring people in, we grow and develop them, and sometimes we're not paying attention to them, and they get stolen by some of the other best companies. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about, because I think it's so important before you onboard people that you're really making sure that you have a successful hire. So we have a model that we use about hiring. It's a very simple model, but it kind of makes sense when you're looking at what you need to do to make a successful hire. And the first piece of that is, can they do the job? That's just skill, education, and experience, most of the things that you'd see on a resume. And quite frankly, that's where we have the biggest impact, because we can train people in the skills that are needed. The second area is, how will they do their job, which really has to do with behaviors and their style and their competency. And with this particular piece, you do have influence over that. If you have really clear expectations and proper coaching, you can help people to adapt their behaviors and styles to fit the job. The last one, and the one that I think is most important, is, will they be motivated in the job? Because people either walk in with motivation or they don't. You have very little impact on that. So this has to do with your motivators, your drivers, your work ethic. So those are the three things that we think are really important. And one of the things that we do in the hiring process is we use assessments. You know, a lot of times the quote here is, over an overwhelming 85% of people actually lie or kind of fudge their resumes a little bit. And what we really find in the hiring process, if you can use assessments and match them to a benchmark of what you know has been successful in the position, it really takes the guesswork out of hiring to make sure you're bringing on the best people for the position. The other thing is, once people are on, I think one of the most important things that we see, and we really think it's the key to success, is the employee and manager relationship. You know, I really feel, you know, it's when we work with organizations that we see that managers can either be the bridge to that success, or they can sometimes be the barrier to that success. And I think that's so important. You know, I even look at kind of my own path. And, you know, I was in college, I kind of waitressed myself through college because my parents didn't have enough money to pay for it. And I just remember this one manager I had. He was just horrible, like everything you would never want in a manager. And you know, I was kind of a young, bold kid, and at one point I just couldn't take it anymore, and I took off my little apron that we had and put it down and walked out the door, because I just never felt so degraded and not appreciated. I'd only been there 3 months, and he already had me training all the new people, but he still treated me horribly. And I remember, you know, what that felt like. It didn't even matter that I was making a lot of money and really needed the money. I just didn't want to be treated that way. You know, and on the other hand, when I was in my career, I was partners in a larger consulting firm, and the founder of that firm was the best manager, coach, and mentor that I ever had in my life. He was just a wonderful person who always looked to bring out your strengths and make sure that you were doing what you loved and you did a good job and you had everything to do that. And there was such a level of trust and respect that I had for him, so much so that when we went through a little crash in, you know, 2008, when a lot of people did, I worked for almost 6 months without a paycheck, because I cared so much about what he had done for me in the company. So I think managers, that employee relationship is just so important. And what we really find, and it's kind of a simple metric when you look at it, is if managers treat their employees well and they're really engaged, do they feel that they care about them, have their best interest in mind, they're coaching, developing, training them, they're going to stay, and they're just going to provide better service because they're in a good place. And when employees provide really great service, they tend to have satisfied customers. And when customers are satisfied, not only do they stay, but they grow, and they also refer. And when customers do that, that's actually what is the key to profitability and growth. And I really believe, again, that it all kind of starts with what we see with the managers. And Dan, do you have any examples of good or bad managers, or how you feel those relationships are important?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it when you were talking that one of the assumptions that I think I've made over a lot of years is that what's important to me is important to my team. I
Mm,
don't mean just the things that, like for instance, if I wanted to, have a good performance review, or if I wanted to get stock, or if I wanted some reward that was sitting out there, and over time things have really shifted. What people work for different reasons, and I've really had to change and adapt the way I think about what's important to people by understanding what drives them. And back to your Glassdoor example, people and employees are equally informed as prospective employees are before they come into the company. So you either are sort of living those values and engaging them in a way that's meaningful to them, or you're not. So it's a little bit anecdotal, but it is something that I think is more front of my mind than it was probably 5, 10 years ago.
yeah, that's great. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Dan.
Yeah.
So the quote here is companies with high employee engagement stats have a 50% higher customer loyalty than those with poor employee engagement stats. It's just so important. We just really see that engaged employees treat customers differently, and customers stay because of that direct connection that they have with the employees. It's generally not with the managers, it's with the frontline people that they have that connection with. So very important. So three main things we're going to talk about today when we're talking about onboarding and retaining your workforce is, first of all, we're going to talk about really bringing clarity, that people have the right focus. And we're going to talk about connection, which is people working in what they would consider a great environment. And then the third one is them really having confidence so that there's a high performing team. About 25% of employers have an active engagement strategy for their company. Only 25%. Really looking at how that employee engagement is key to profitability of a company. It's shocking sometimes that employees really don't think about how important it is to keep people engaged. And again, sometimes we find when people aren't engaged, some of the other companies, you'll even lose some of your best performers to other companies. That they steal the good ones, not the other ones. So the first thing we're going to talk about is clarity. And when employees have clarity, not only can they make better decisions and make quicker, better decisions, but they tend to be highly productive when they do that. And people, we go to work and we just want to be productive. We want to do a good job. We want to be effective. We want to make a difference. I know when my husband comes home and says, "How was your day?" When I say it was a really great day, the next thing is I tell him all of the things that I got done. And that was because I had clarity about what I wanted to do that day, what my goals were, what my priorities, what were the most important things to do. And employees that don't have that clarity, we really see them floundering. They're not sure what to work on, or they're not working on the most important things or in the most effective way, and maybe even the wrong things in some cases. Another thing about clarity, it's interesting. I might go out to dinner with someone, and of course, after I ask them how their family is, usually the next question I ask them is, "How is work going?" And a lot of times what we hear with them is that they're not sure about what they should be working on, and there's a sense of overwhelm that they're feeling. There's so many things that they're working on that they don't know which one to do next. They don't know which one is most important, and they're drowning. They can't keep their heads above water. And interestingly, we do leadership programs. Sometimes what I'll actually ask the leader, and sometimes their team members, is if I was to ask the people that report to you, what are the three most important priorities that they need to accomplish this year? Would their answer to that be the same answer that you have? Just simple clarity between an employee and a manager relationship. And sometimes we just really don't see that. So some of the things, a couple other quotes here. 69% of employees are more likely to stay with a company for 3 years if they experience great onboarding. And what we'll talk about too is part of the onboarding is really just giving them clarity. It's one of the things you really want to do in onboarding. And strong management transparency leads to 30% better employee retention. I think people want clarity. They want the managers to really tell them what's going on. Unfortunately, what a lot of us do when we aren't exactly clear or we haven't been communicated with or there isn't transparency is we kind of make things up, and generally we don't make up good things. So really, really important that there's transparency that goes along with that clarity. So how to bring clarity to employees so that they can hit the ground running. And we're going to talk about all of these first about onboarding. So what do you do in the onboarding process, and also ongoingly. So that's more about the retention. So onboarding, it's just so important to set time aside to really share and discuss these things. And then with ongoing, when we have changes, are we communicating those? Are we reinforcing those? Are we talking about them? So a lot of times with onboarding, these are basic things. I think we all know these, but it's just kind of a reminder, is really let people know about the company and where you have been and what's the strategy for the future going forward. What are you looking to accomplish? What are the goals? I think company culture is so important, that people really understand the mission and the vision and the values of that particular company. There's one company that is a client of ours that has about 1,900 retail stores, and they are growing like gangbusters. And they have just a beautiful set of values that people actually live by. They're not just hanging on a wall somewhere. Like the employees actually live by those values. And they're growing so quickly because of the way they serve their customers. And people want to work in this culture because they want to be in a culture where they have shared values. So that's so important that people understand that. Just basic human resource processes and procedures people have to know. Sometimes they really get stuck when they don't. But then I think one of the most important things in onboarding is really making sure that people are really crystal clear about what are the priorities of the department. And then in our department, what are our team's goals? What are the most important things for us? And then as myself being in the department, what are my roles? What are my priorities? What are my goals? And how often can we sit down with a manager and make sure that the expectations of the manager and the employee are the same? I think that's just really important to make sure that we're bringing that type of clarity. So Dan, anything else that you would add to bringing clarity to the group, or anything else that Live Tiles does to help with bringing clarity?
Yeah, we talk about our values quite a bit, and we're maybe similar to some, dissimilar in other ways, but we're a fairly well, we're a global company, but we're fairly small in terms of our employee headcount. So we're just a little over 200 people. And when you think about connecting 200 people across maybe 8 or 10 different offices in different countries and time zones, when you talk about the culture, it's very easy to understand the words, but particularly now when people aren't physically getting together as much, even on video, it's tough at times to create that connection. It's hard to understand that sort of workflow and that cadence that brings the culture out in a lot of ways. And so we talk a lot about, sort of understanding what the key values are and how people can demonstrate them. Because that kind of plays back into what you're talking about, clarity in their job role, which is they may know what their job is, but they maybe wouldn't understand the style or the cadence or the context around it, particularly being so, to some degree, physically removed from people. So we use the values as a means to help indicate kind of how you can be productive and still feel connected to what the company's mission is overall. And it's tough. It's tough to do it, even in a perfect situation when everyone's in the office. So it's something that we think we're getting better at, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a reminder, like we know them, but we get so busy in our day-to-day work that it's sometimes just nice to have a reminder of those things. And I think it is what really connects people in the culture too, if they're like-minded about that. Great. Thanks, Dan. So the next thing that we are going to chat about is connection. And this for Data Dome, this is really where we focus most of our time and attention, is on the relationships that people have and the connectiveness that they feel to each other. We really find that people want to belong. They want to be part of something. Nobody wants to feel left out or not involved in things. And sometimes the deeper those connections are and the more people really get to know each other and understand each other, we really see that that raises the engagement level that people have, and it also increases the loyalty that people have to the company. It's interesting. If I was to chat with most people and ask them if at work, what might your three biggest complaints be? They're almost always the same every time I'm listening to people as they're kind of complaining about work. And the first one is what I mentioned before: is people just feel overwhelmed. I don't know too many people that really just don't feel like there's so much they need to get done and they can't do it. But I think what happens is often we just put our heads down and we're trying to be independent and getting our work done alone. And we really try to move people towards interdependency. How can you partner with other people? Because the things that I'm not good at, someone else is great at. And the things that they're really good at, they could probably use some things that I'm good at. So the interconnectedness is really important. The second thing people often complain about is someone at work's driving them crazy. Now, 9 times out of 10, it's their boss, but not always their boss. It could be Bob in accounting, but somebody's driving them crazy, and there isn't a connectedness. And what we really find, again, if you're trying to get work done because we're so busy and someone's getting in the way of what you're trying to get done, you might want to work really quickly and get to the result quickly, and someone else is talking too much, or nobody's giving you information, or they're giving you way too much detail. We tend to take that 10% of the person that we don't like, and it just annoys us, and we can only focus on that 10%, and then we start getting even more independent. We start working around or avoiding those people instead of working with them. We really try to help people look at the 10% about that's how the person is. And I always have a saying is that the person that annoys you the most is most likely the one you need the most, because they're so opposite of you, or maybe you need to be a little bit more like some of the really good traits they have. And we try to have people look at the 90%. If they only look at the 10% that annoys them, they miss the 90% of what's great about people, and they miss that connectiveness. And we really find that if they can do that, they can produce more together. The third one that we usually hear as a complaint, outside of being overwhelmed and somebody driving them crazy at work, is that they don't often say this, but I know that they feel it, and they don't feel appreciated in the work that they do. And we really find when people start to understand themselves and how they relate and interact with people, and they can adapt and adjust that, like Dan was talking about in his management style, and they start to understand others and really start looking for where they can form partnerships, we start to see things really change. And then people do feel appreciated because people are using what's great about them, and they do feel appreciated. So the couple quotes for this is about 96% of employees, 96% cite that empathy is an often overlooked factor that is also important for employee retention. I think people want to be listened to, heard, and understood. And when you have a boss that has that type of empathy and they have the social skills, it's really important. One of the other things is 51% of participants who strongly agreed with this statement. This is an old Gallup survey that has been around forever. I have a best friend at work. We're engaged, compared to only 10% of those who disagreed or strongly disagreed. Again, just focusing on how important it is for people to have that connection and have someone that they feel that connectedness to. So how do we ensure connection? Because what's really important when people feel connection is they're going to feel trust, and they're going to feel that appreciation that they have for each other. So onboarding, we really take a lot of time to make sure we're making introductions, and people really are getting to know each other. We spend so much time in getting them to know their job and what they have to do and their goals, but how about getting to know the other people? And then ongoingly, is there a way that we can really build stronger relationships with the people that we have? It's interesting when I work with a lot of leaders, there's so many things that they manage. They manage their budgets and their projects and their priorities, but often people don't manage their relationships. And given that most of what we get done happens through other people, really building those stronger relationships and strategically thinking about how you can build stronger connections with people becomes so important. And probably to me, one of the most important ones, again, keep going back to that employee manager relationship. It was interesting. This was last summer because we didn't do a lot of social connection this summer, that we had our kids, and so a bunch of their friends were over, and they were all chatting about work and how work was going. And I was just kind of in the background on the side with my margarita listening. And it was interesting to me that the one person had just gotten a promotion and a big raise and was looking for a job, because all he could do was complain about his boss and how he didn't appreciate him and he didn't help him and he took advantage of him. And he was the one who had just gotten the promotion and the raise. And then there were some that were like, work's fine, everything's good, kind of just going in, doing what they do. And there was one other person, this young lady, that was raving about her job, just raving about how much she loved her job and that her manager was amazing. And then she went on to say, but right now I'm doing the job of 2.5 people because we have people out and I'm covering both their positions. Never even complained about it because she loved her manager and had that trust and appreciation. So I just think that's really important. So especially when you're onboarding, are you sharing your expectations? Are you telling them about your style and how you manage good, bad, and the ugly? And are you talking to them about the best way to communicate? Are you, making sure that the development needs are being discussed, and you're talking about and asking your employees, how can you best be managed? How can I best motivate you? I think that is just so important. And then you kind of build on that. It's really important to understand the team dynamics. Do I know each member of the team? Do I value what's great about them? Am I clear about their area of expertise? And maybe even a team dossier that talks about each of the team members and those things. A lot of times when I see people are in a good shape, the team's in a good shape, the next thing we sometimes see is the departments are kind of going back and forth. Sales are promising things, operation can't deliver, and operations are doing things that customer service is having a hard time with. So, really forming that deeper connection with other departments, really sitting down and understand what's the most important thing to this department and what can I do that would help that, or what can I do that actually hinders that, and can we have a discussion about that so we can build deeper connections even at a department level. And the last one, and I think this one's a little bit more for onboarding, but even ongoing, to have a buddy or have a mentor, like have a buddy that's going to help you kind of navigate the organization, or maybe if you've been there for a while, really having a mentor that is looking, has your best interest in mind and is looking for what they can do to help ensure your engagement in the company. So Dan, how about Lives Tiles? Can you talk a little bit about, and you really do form connections, kind of taking technology to form connections. So anything that you'd want to share in that area?
Yeah, there's a few things, and again, some of it we've been doing for quite some time, where some things we've been a bit more, reactive to the current state that we're in. But one of the things that we started, in fact, one of our co-founders, Peter, started this quite some time ago, is that, I'm not exactly sure what we call it, but for lack of a better term, it's like phone a friend. And we have our internal social platform where a lot of people post things that are, praise or information about particular departments or just announcements. But we ask that every month someone pick up the phone and tag someone on the social chat that we have going, and tag someone that you haven't spoken with, or someone that you haven't spoken with in 6 months. And then they set up a time and they go off and they have their chat, and they usually have some anecdote that they come back with, whether it's they play the same sport, or they have the same hobby, or something. They grew up in the same town, they didn't know it. There's always these little connections that kind of sit back in markers in your head, that the next time you pick up the phone and talk to that person, it's a little bit more familiar, and it creates that connection that you probably wouldn't have if you just needed to call them up and get something done in that moment. something that we do that's a bit more process and procedural in some ways is we've we've created these outcome profiles that and I don't know how standard that term is, but we call them outcome profiles, where what we try to do is balance this idea of clarity and connection, which is we'll
Mm,
actually go through and create a pie chart of, generally speaking, how you should be spending your time to create connection with, whether it's the company strategy or what we call living the brand. And we try to map those back into how you actually focus your day-to-day work. It's not a perfect science, but it is really good when you see the things that you put time into, like the example you had with a person that was doing two and a half jobs as one person. You know, there's probably a lot of things that could be overlapping, or tasks that may be less important. And if you know kind of what the outcomes are for each of those roles, maybe you can create some efficiencies that way. That's not the reason why we designed those. It's really meant for one person, one job, but it is something that's good to have, that creates at least a conversation about whether or not that person is spending the time on the right tasks and projects. And then if not, you have a conversation about how to improve that.
that's great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like with everything being remote these days, I think the connection is even more important. So I like the idea of, talking to people you haven't talked to in a while, and people especially with the same interests. We're finding some companies are doing fun things like, forming little groups, that they share like their favorite movies or what they're binging on Netflix, or, they're doing book clubs, or, people doing actually, instead of doing a meeting, they're having walking meetings, where everybody goes out
Yeah.
for a walk at noon and they have walking meetings and just trying to form connections that way. So,
We have this one thing called a minute to win it.
oh, what's
And
that?
so basically what we do is we have people either catching themselves doing cool things, or other people catching other people doing cool things, and just sharing them from around the world. And that we ask that they're all videos, that they're
Oh,
not
wow.
just pictures or whatever. So it might be someone, walking on a hiking trail somewhere in Switzerland. It might be someone, like you said, doing a meeting, doing a webinar while they're walking down the street with their dog. We actually had that happen once. So
That's
it's fun. These little things just create connection, and we like them.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. It's so interesting how technology can either divide us or bring us together. So those are great ideas.
Yeah.
Great ideas. Well, the last one we're going to talk about is confidence. So when employees feel confident, they perform their job duties faster and better. And everybody wants to do a good job. People want to grow, they want to learn, they want to be promoted, and making sure that we're training people so that they have everything they need in order to do their jobs. I think sometimes we just assume they know, or we hired them at that level, they should know how to do that. But it's really making sure you're doing an assessment of what training needs to be done, and making sure that it's done. And even ongoingly, people really want to grow and improve, and I think it's really important. This is an interesting story. So I was doing a leadership development program at a company. This is years ago, but it's always stuck in my head. And there's about 25 people. It was I think 5 to 6 month leadership program that we were doing with the group. And the first day, this gentleman comes up to me and he said to me, and this leadership program was for high potentials. You had to be chosen to be in this leadership program. And this gentleman comes up to me and he goes, I don't know why I'm here. He goes, I do a great job. All my projects come in on time and under budget. And I don't know why I have to come to this and waste time when I could be working. And I said to him, I go, I gotcha. And I said, well, how about if you do me a favor? I said, come to 2 sessions. And if after 2 sessions you really feel this is a waste of time, I will talk to the powers that be and I will get you out of this. I promise you that. But you got to come to 2 sessions. He's like, all right. He was a little grumpy about it. So, the first session we did a lot about talking about self-awareness and adaptation and how that helps or hinders results. And I could see that he was furrowed brow a little, so I could see that he was thinking. And he came back to the second one and was much more engaged, but I still had a feeling he wasn't going to come to the third one and I was going to have the conversation. But what was really interesting is he came back to the third one and he said to me, I was wrong. And I said, about what? He said that I couldn't do things better. He goes, I found that my guys, I manage them to get everything done on time and on budget, and I tell them everything to do. And he was a very detailed oriented person, so he trained them and did everything he needed to do, and he had all his spreadsheets and his sheets to do everything. He goes, but I'm not leading my people. He said, so they don't have confidence because I didn't have confidence in them. And he said, so after the first session, I went back and said to my team, here's our next project, and here's when it needs to be done by, and this is the budget for it. And I would like you as a team to do it without me managing you. And if there's anything you need from me, you come and ask me. I'm right here, but I would like you to do it. And I said, so why were you wrong? He said, because it's the first time in 13 years that something came in a week and a half early and under budget. And he goes, and that wasn't the best part of it. I could see how engaged all of my team was because they now had the confidence that they could do that themselves. And he goes, and it had to be me letting go to do that. And he goes, and because I wasn't managing them, I actually got to start thinking about things strategically and things that I could do differently and things that I could do to coach and mentor as opposed to manage. So he ended up coming to the rest of the session. So this is kind of a story about how important it is, I think, to have confidence. You want everybody to have all the tools that they need and the training they need to do their jobs, but you as leaders also have to give them the confidence. I find people that are confident perform so much higher than other people. So the first one is 70% of the respondents indicated that job-related training and development opportunities influence their decision to stay at the company. Again, I do think people that feel like they're not getting training and development opportunities are stagnant and they're not going to grow, and they would sometimes even take a pay cut to go somewhere where they would get more of that and get more growth. 1 in 5 employees is not confident that their manager will provide regular constructive feedback on their work. It's interesting, I think sometimes we see, it's telling to me that when people do performance appraisals, if they've coached and mentored and talked to their people the whole time and given them confidence, the performance appraisals are no shock because they've been talking about these things the whole time. And generally you'll see higher performers, but sometimes managers wait to performance appraisals to tell people all of the things that they're doing wrong that they haven't even tried to talk to them about or coach them or mentor them or help them with it. And people really struggle with that. So with confidence, how do you instill confidence so that employees can perform at their very best? And again, these are pretty simple things that we all know, but when we're onboarding, are we giving them the tools and the training, the feedback, and the coaching that they require? And ongoingly, I think one of the things where people lose confidence is when there's competing priorities or multiple demands, or there's a lot of changes happening, but nobody's communicating those to them. So how can we make sure that we're communicating all the changes and talking to people about the training and development? You know, and for onboarding, again, this is such a simple one, but I was talking to a client just the other day. She started at a new company and she didn't have the tools to do her job. She's like, I don't even have my email yet. They haven't given me this. I don't even have this program, you know. So just the simple office setup with technologies, programs, phones, all the basic things that you need. And then I think what's really important with the onboarding is make sure you really clearly think about all the training this person's going to need to be successful. And you can actually go back, excuse me, to the can, how, will conversation we had about hiring. You know, are there skills that they need? Is there technology that they need? Do they need to be trained in competencies? Is it more of a soft skills? Is it more of a behavioral based thing that we're seeing? Am I training them on the job, in the moment, in what they're doing? And really, you know, assess. Here's when I hired them. Here's some areas that they were weak in, and here's the areas that I'm going to make sure I develop them so that they can do their very best at this job. You know, if you were to rate people when you hire them on a 0 to 100 scale, I'd say most often we're hiring people that are about 75 to 80% of the perfect ideal candidate. And when I find people that are really clear about how they're going to train them, coach them, mentor them, they can take a 75 and make them a 90 performer, 90% performer. But people that aren't clear about that and really haven't thought about what am I going to do to make sure they have everything they need to be successful, sometimes you'll take a 75 and they'll slide back to a 60 because they don't have that clarity and they don't have what they need to be successful. So really important. Always be coaching and developing, especially this is ongoing. People want to hear what they're doing well. They want to hear where they can get better. They want those open, honest conversations. I told you when I worked at the larger consulting firm, the gentleman that I worked for 6 months without a paycheck because of how much I thought of him and in the organization. Probably had the hardest conversations with me anybody's ever had with me, but I never once doubted it wasn't because he deeply cared about me and would actually talk to me about things like other people would shy away from. So coaching and development is just really important. And evaluate progress, give people feedback. People want feedback on how they're doing in all of these different areas. So Dan, did you have anything that you'd add about building confidence in employees or anything else that Live Tiles does?
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind for me is creating or making sure people know what the finish line looks like. And
Uh,
there's sort of short term, mid, and long term finish lines and things like that. You know, in our company, we're growing pretty fast, and we do have shifting priorities, whether or not the last 6 months happened or not. And sometimes we jump from one thing to another. And so the tasks or the projects in focus might be, um, you know, within a realm of reality of a reasonableness that we think we can go jump on and shift to, but sometimes we don't close off the thing we just came off of. And shifting those pillars and those focus areas sometimes, gets people a little jittery, that you're not seeing things through. And I think it does feed into the confidence that you can see things through and actually finish the thing that you were working on. And so it's a lot better than it was in the early days for us, but it is something that it's sort of forefront in their minds because we want people to feel like they can create something and finish something, and then have the confidence to go off and go co-create something else, kind of on their own. So things are, being more sort of in their control, more proactive, as opposed to just kind of falling on their lap. So we do think about that quite a bit.
yeah, interesting that you say that. We have one of the assessments we do is called a stress quotient, and it looks at 7 different levels of stress in an individual and an organization. And one of the top 3 almost always comes out organizational change not being communicated. And when people don't understand things, again, this that they don't have they lack that clarity to go forward, and it's so important. And we offer to a lot of companies. I even do this with wonderful ladies that work with me. Every Monday we get on the phone and we talk about what are the priorities for the week, and we get really clear, and they often change. We thought it was one thing, but something else happened. So getting that clarity on priorities. And then a lot of the companies, what we offer to them too is just do a 15-minute stand-up meeting in the morning. Everybody grab their coffee, stand up, have a quick meeting, like talk about what's really important today, what are our priorities, where is somebody stuck, what can we do to help you. And sometimes just every day having like quick conversation about that gives people that confidence and that clarity to move in. So I think those things are definitely important. So just to kind of wrap up the 3 things, again, really looking at how can we ensure the most success for people when we're onboarding them and retaining them. And again, the first thing is just they really have to have the right focus and that clarity by looking at strategy and goals, objectives, roles and responsibilities. And again, having really clear expectations from their manager. I think the second one is really making sure that people are in a great environment because they have that connection, building trust. It was a book that was put out a while ago. It's called The Speed of Trust. Stephen Covey's son wrote it. And the whole book was about how building trust produces results for organizations. Some of the most successful organizations have the highest trust scores. People know and value your strengths. There's open, honest communication and, really great environments. People make really great commitments and hold others accountable to those commitments. And for high performance, can we build that confidence just in training and skill building, coaching, developing, and giving feedback? So that's kind of a blend of all of them in this. One of the things that we were going to offer to you, because a lot of you are working from home, is we have a working from home report. It's really an interesting report. It only takes about 10 minutes to fill out, and it'll email to you directly. And it talks about your style at work and where that might help or hinder you when you're working remotely. And then it also talks about reading the styles of the people that you're working with and knowing how to adapt to increase communication and effectiveness. And then there's also a worksheet that you can kind of go through to raise self-awareness and be a little bit more thoughtful about that. And you can just go to ttisurvey.com and enter that code. Again, it takes about 10 minutes and you'll have a report for yourself after. So I hope that's something that would be beneficial for people as we're kind of all going through these challenging times working remotely. And then Dan, I'll bring it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Thanks for that. That's fantastic information. I mean, I think, it's a mix of, fundamentals right now and things that we should be, reminding ourselves that we should be thinking about as we're all working more remotely, but also, things that are a bit more, pragmatic in terms of how we can use data and information to help drive these connections and confidence in our employees. To tie this off, we were kind of at the onset talking about technology and technology serving us. And not to get overly too focused on technology here, but technology can help unearth resources and information to create these connections and clarity, and to some degree build that confidence to do our work better. We don't pretend we're the only ones to come up with these ideas, but we do believe that every company should be able to reach their employees, and we have a product that's actually its namesake is LiveTiles Reach. And what we're really trying to do is give people the means to create targeted connection and targeted information to help people do their work. And then we also have two other key pieces of technology that we think help support the human connection. We have LiveTiles Everywhere that surfaces things to you in one screen that is basically your job in one navigation that follows you, if you will. And then we have a really, really cool directory offering that proactively gathers information about employees. Now, if you think about directories for 1 second, that people think phone books and maybe profile pictures, but in many cases, you don't know much about the employee beyond who they are, or maybe the office they work out of. It was funny, so many customers came to us and they said, can you help us just get cell phone numbers of our employees? We don't have cell phone numbers for them. But if you get beyond that, you start thinking about what can you tap into within your employee base that you don't have. They may know different languages. They may have worked in different regions. They may have skill sets that are completely outside of their college degree or their job that they have. And these are things that should feed into this ongoing dynamic profile that you have in that employee that can go towards not only helping lead and manage them, but also helping connect them to work in a career path that they wouldn't have had. So not to geek out too much on technology, but there are ways to automate this. And so what we do is we offer all these tools for free trials. And if they work for your organization, we'd love to engage with you. And if not, you can still use them on the free trial and hopefully learn a little bit about how to connect with your employees in a way that you weren't doing it previously. So just in the last slide here, Lisa, if anyone does want to reach out to LiveTiles or Lisa and Datadome after this, please send an email to communications@livetiles.nyc. And we'll be happy to connect with you and talk to you about anything relative to this webinar or any topic of interest to you. So thank you. I hope you made it this far. And Lisa, thank you for your time and for your information. And
thank you for having me, Dan.
Great, excellent. Stay well, everyone.